Friends, do you know how many times we've heard stories that just stick in our heads, but turn out not to be completely true? Let's talk about some of those. Remember how we always learned that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492? His name is everywhere, right? But here's a little secret. Columbus didn't actually discover America. He never even set foot on what we now call the United States. Think about it. People were already living here for thousands of years. Native American tribes had their homes and cultures all over this land. And even before Columbus, way back, brave Viking explorers like Leif Erikson visited parts of North America almost 500 years earlier. So, Columbus just kind of got a little lost and found some islands in the Caribbean. The sad part is, his arrival caused a lot of trouble and suffering for the people who were already there. And what about those giant pyramids in Egypt? The story we heard was usually that slaves, under the hot sun, were forced to drag huge stones for mean kings. Sounds dramatic, right? But guess what? That picture isn't right at all. Today, we know from studying history that the people who built those amazing pyramids weren't slaves. They were actually very skilled workers, like engineers, architects, and stonecutters, and they were paid for their hard work. They even had places to live and got medical help when they needed it. These workers were really proud of what they were building. The idea of slaves building the pyramids was just a made-up story to make it sound more exciting, but it wasn't the real deal. Then there's Napoleon Bonaparte. You've probably heard jokes about him being really short and angry, maybe even having a Napoleon complex. But hold on, that's another fib. The truth is, Napoleon was about 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was actually a pretty normal height for Frenchmen back then. The rumors about him being short started because British newspapers wanted to make him look bad during the war. They wanted people to think he was small and weak, and sadly, it worked. Even today, that untrue story is still floating around. How many times were you told that the Great Wall of China is the one and only thing made by people that you can see from space? Sounds super cool, right? But it's totally false. Astronauts who have actually been in space have said that you can't see the Great Wall with just your eyes from up there. It's just too thin, and it kind of blends in with the ground. This myth probably started because people wanted to make the wall seem even more incredible than it already is. And while it is one of the world's wonders, it's not visible from the stars. Let's talk about the famous Salem witch trials. We were often told that witches were burned at the stake, screaming as the fires took them away. But in reality, not a single person in the Salem witch trials was burned. Not even one. Most of them were hanged. One man was sadly crushed to death under heavy stones. Burning witches did happen, but that was in Europe, not in Salem. The fiery image of witches is more like something from a movie than real history. Here's a common one you might have heard. In school, or from someone trying to inspire you, Albert Einstein failed math as a student. People say it to show that even really smart people can struggle. But here's the actual truth. Einstein never failed math. He was actually super good at it. By the time he was just 12 years old, he was already learning complicated math like calculus. He did fail an entrance exam for a technical school once, but he actually passed the math part with high scores. The story about him failing math was just made up to make us feel better about our own struggles, but it's simply not true. Now, let's chat about the Civil War. Most folks believe the American Civil War was only about slavery. And yes, slavery was a huge, huge reason, one of the biggest for sure. But the war wasn't just about that one thing. It was also about money, about states wanting to make their own rules called states' rights. and about who had the most political power. Some southern states really wanted to make their own laws and run their own economies. And sadly, that included keeping slavery. The truth is, the war was really complicated, and saying it was just about one thing makes the whole picture too simple. And what about Vikings? Every movie, cartoon, or comic shows Vikings wearing those helmets with horns. But guess what? That image is a total myth. Real Vikings never wore horned helmets when they went into battle. That idea came from people who designed costumes in the 1800s, especially for opera shows. Real Viking helmets were plain, strong, and made for fighting, not for looking fancy. Another story we were told, Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, supposedly said, "Let them eat cake," when her people were starving and had no bread. It made her sound heartless and cruel. But the real truth is there's no actual proof that she ever said that. That line was probably invented by people during the French Revolution to make her look worse and to turn everyone against her. She might have been a bit out of touch, but those specific words probably never came out of her mouth. And finally, maybe one of the biggest myths of all that, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Edison was a truly brilliant inventor. Yes, but he didn't just create the light bulb from nothing. Other inventors had already made early versions before him. For example, a British scientist named Joseph Swan had a working light bulb before Edison did. What Edison did do was make the light bulb much better, more practical for everyday use, and super important, he patented it. He turned it into a huge business success. So while he made the light bulb famous, he wasn't the very first person to invent it. Isn't it wild how these stories change over time?